The Cyber Resiliency Act threatens the future of open source. Now, I tend to stay away from politics. Little worried that I might be stepping directly into it with this one, but let's find out. Apparently, the EU is setting their sights on open source. The European Union is currently considering approval of the Cyber Resiliency Act, CRAY. That actually stands for Create React App. I don't know if you know this, but Cyber Resiliency Act is all wrong. That's Create React App, which has been the terror of many Theo's dreams for a long time now. A proposed regulation that is a major threat to the future of the global open source industry. While the intention of the act is to enhance cybersecurity, which is extremely welcome, its current form lacks clear liability exemptions for many open source developers and maintainers, which could be a death knell. Is that knell? Let's see, for open source in the EU, and which could spark additional global implications. Oh, interesting. Okay, so obviously I haven't read the act. I have no idea, but it sounds like what they're trying to say, what he's saying here is that there's a liability now being foisted upon whomever is the one that is like the root cause of the liability. Yeah, I know it extensively, but this is interesting. It's interesting. I have no idea, so I'm not going to say whether this is true or not. We're just going to take, obviously, the article at face value. I'm not going to go into here and try to understand this thing, because I'm sure this thing, if we went and we opened it and tried to read it, it would end up being like a huge amount of stuff. Oh, okay, it's actually really little. Okay, let's just see what this says. The proposed regulation on cybersecurity requirements for products with digital elements, known as Cyber Resiliency Act, bolster security rules to ensure more secure hardware and software products. All right. Hardware and software products are increasingly subjected to successful cyber attacks, leading to an estimated global and annual cost of cybercrime of 5.5 trillion pounds. Wait, EUs. Such products suffer from two major problems, adding costs for users and society. One, a low level of cybersecurity reflected by widespread vulnerabilities and insufficient and inconsistent provisions of security updates to address them, and an insufficient understanding and access to information by users, preventing them from choosing products with adequate cybersecurity properties or using them in a secure manner. Interesting. While existing, I mean, the second one seems really, really difficult. Like, how do you say that you're the best, right? You know, like every year some 0-day hack comes out, which is just like completely destroying even the most secure software. So this second one just seems really interesting to even try to like define which is like the best software. Oh, I'm choosing the one with the most secure thumbs up, right? Like, is it really the most secure, or just have we not discovered the massive security that may be even being abused currently? You know what I mean? All right. While existing internal market legislation applies to certain products with digital elements, most of the hardware and software products are currently not covered by any EU legislation tackling their cybersecurity. In particular, the current EU legal framework does not address the cybersecurity of non-embedded software, even if security attacks increasingly target vulnerabilities in these products, causing significant societal and economic costs. The two main objectives were identified, aiming to ensure the proper functioning of the internal market. One, create conditions for development of secure products with digital elements by ensuring that hardware and software products are placed on the market with fewer vulnerabilities, and ensure that the manufacturers take security seriously throughout the product's lifecycle. Okay, so this is very interesting, because obviously what I read when I hear this is that there's a stick at the end of this. You do it right or else. That's how I read that. Obviously, I don't want to look at the official language. The official language is probably going to be just impossible to read. Let's see. 2, create conditions allowing users to take cybersecurity into account when selecting and using products with digital elements. This is that really interesting thing, because you know, you're only stating you don't have known issues. You know what I mean? It's just kind of like silly. You can't, like, I totally get that you're like, maybe there's some set of standards, like how fast you're supposed to fix it or something like that. I don't really understand what they're going to do with it, but still, it just seems kind of funny. 4 specific objectives were set out. Ensure that the manufacturers improve the security of projects with digital elements since the design and development phase and throughout the whole project lifecycle. I mean, really, every company I've ever worked at has taken this top priority and got it wrong. Me personally, the Primogen, have personally introduced a bug at Netflix that could have taken down and held down Netflix until a fix, an only forward fix we could not roll back, was possible. And we literally gave it a name, which is the repulsive grizzly attack. Like, me personally created this bug at Netflix. Okay? And guess what? There was a group of people who signed off on it. Okay? I literally made this. This is me. I didn't make the logo or this nice library. Okay? I was the one who made the bug. I made my own attack vector, right? I'm just saying it's not that simple, right? You just don't know. Insider confirmed 2023. All right. Ensure a coherent cybersecurity framework facilitates compliance for hardware and software producers. Again, I just think that this is the impossible, right? This is the impossible ask. Enhance the transparency of security properties of products with digital elements. Again, I think this is an impossible thing because people, like, remember when they said we have to be transparent about salaries in California? So Netflix posts salaries that are ranging from $90,000 to $900,000 for every software engineering job, right? We're transparent about what we pay, but it literally means nothing to you. You know what I mean? And that's the problem with these kind of things, is that I understand the heart. We want to know what products do what. But the reality is what you get is just some ridiculous thing in the end, right? It's just like, oh, okay, cool. Enable business and consumers to use products with digital elements securely. Again, that's the entire field of research, right? That's what everyone's trying to prevent. I don't know any companies that are just like, yeah, right, we're never going to get hacked. We're never going to get hacked. That's stupid, right? What it really is it's more like, dude, hey, our 17-year-old co-founder has been programming for the last 14 days straight, and we're going to release this product into the public. Like, that's where most security problems come from. It's not like it's not like they're like, oh, hell yeah, we're not thinking about that. Hell yeah, we think cybersecurity is a joke. Okay, it's a joke. No, most people are, I've never worked at a place where they actually thought that. Anyways, okay, so now that we have a general idea of what it's going to happen, let's move on to this one. All right, the CRAY, the Create React App regulation for the EU, was proposed on September 15th, 2022 by the European Commission. The intent is to improve cybersecurity and cyber resiliency in the EU through common cybersecurity standards for products with digital elements. I still don't really, honestly, I've been working in this field for 15 years or 20 years or some shit like that, and I honestly don't know what this means. I'm just going to throw it out there. I literally have no idea what digital elements are, okay? Do they just precisely mean things with ones and zeros? Is that a digital element? An NFT? Is an NFT? Is that what it is? Is it NFT? If it has a cable? What if he is Tom and he is a genius? Okay, this is a good point. Tom probably could do that. And nothing like politics solving engineering problems. Always the best. It's always been the best. In theory, this is welcome. Yeah, I agree. But there are some notable areas that many open source developers and industry organizations are concerned about. Modern applications are comprised of 90% open source code. I wonder if that's true. I like, where do you define comprised of, right? So if you're using Docker, is your application comprised of or just uses, right? What does that mean? I don't know. That's a good question, right? Like Linux. Linux is obviously the biggest code base you'll always have and dwarfs every single product you've ever used in your lifetime. NPM install. Oh no. All right. Penalizing open source developers would lead to a fragmented community and hinder important projects across various sectors, including critical infrastructure, healthcare, and even military systems. This seemingly proposed purposeful omission of exemptions for open source. Oh, okay, so we must have missed this. There's no clear, so obviously, again, we're just giving the benefit of the doubt to Brian Fox that it must state that there is, remember when we were looking at this thing and I said there's likely a stick at the end of this statement, meaning you better do X or else? It sounds like sounds like the consequence of the stick, right? Would be put undue onus on open source foundations and maintainers and poses serious risk to not just EU innovation and security, but global collaboration, something we and many others in the industry have tried to raise awareness about over the past 6 months. Unfortunately, the EU has largely ignored the industry's voice. Holding open source developers whose components end up in commercial products liable for security issues will stifle innovation and harm the EU economy without providing substantive improvement in security. So if this is actually true, right? Again, we're taking things at face value. So if this is actually true, and you are holding whoever creates the security problem, like you hold them responsible for, say, the costs of it, that does sound crazy. Like, right, you can't do that. You can't hold, like, if I make some stupid ass library and then you use it, it's like, hey, by the way, you, like, even the license is like, use at your own risk. Then whose fault is it? Yeah, the license says it's your risk. So now you have this whole, like, whose risk is it, right? That, I mean, it'd be very interesting to see a world in which exists where a government entity is pushing responsibility onto somebody who had a license agreement to somebody else who said that they're the ones with the risk, right? You're going to have it. It just sounds crazy. And most open source development already sucks. Okay? Everyone's already getting in just shit on all the time. Last thing we need is the government shitting on you. This legislation is slated for a vote on July 19th in the Parliament's industry. Well, that means it just got done passing. Research and Energy Committee, the ITRI, where it will then be sent to the full Parliament. If nothing is done, it could be adopted without even a vote in the plenary session by the Parliament itself. By the way, plenary, only knew about that due to TJ. I feel strongly that if open source industry doesn't take a stand now, it will become law in the open source community as we know it will be no more. So there is some truth to this in the sense that there are countries that will, I know there was something with Australia not too long ago that they enacted some sort of thing. And then due to its rules, it became like a complete rule at Netflix, right? Because it was too hard to try to like program. I forget what it was. And, you know, there's also all these like PII, personal identifiable information, right? Some countries allow like 0 of it. And so it just becomes the rule of the software overall, even though it's like a single country dictating rules for the internet. And I know this is like a real problem, right? There's like a real problem where single countries can actually create internet rules when the internet doesn't really have a governing body. You know, it's just kind of like whoever has the tightest constraints wins the battle of who gets the rules. You know, like EU and USB-C for Apple. Yeah, like, I mean, as much as I love this change, which I think the fact that Apple hasn't used USB-C is a crime against humanity, it also is just kind of, you know, for me, it's just a little strange, right? It's just a little strange. It's kind of weird. You know, it's just a weird thing. You know, Apple products now come with USB-C. It's great for me and my wife because now we don't have to argue over what charger goes where. Instead, we just have a singular charger that works for both my Android and Apple. So I love the effect. But EU just made something happen in America by making a rule about something, right? It's just kind of interesting, right? It's just an interesting thing that can happen. And I don't think a lot of people have thought about how our highly connected world can cause places to make laws that affect how other people get stuff. You know what I mean? It's just interesting. Create React app discourages commercial support of open source. The revised Create React app offers new cybersecurity requirements for hardware and software products, much like the U.S.'s national security strategy does. It calls for software vendors and producers to understand what components are in their software and to be able to recall software. Whoopsies. And to be able to recall recall software that is affected by vulnerabilities. But unlike the recent released details for the U.S. strategy, it seems to be trying to call out certain open source projects from foundations and large companies. Okay, so you might be reaching here, but okay. By doing so, it potentially impacts every open source project, which creates a web of issues. Yeah, I mean, just imagine Linux, right? Like Linux does its best job to do the right thing, but still, it's a foundation in which plenty of security problems have happened. It's very, very interesting. It goes without saying that open source projects rely heavily on volunteers, individual contributors, and small teams who often work without significant resources or financial support. I would say, yeah, I'd say this is largely true, but there's also a lot of open source that is directly sponsored by corporations. The support that foundations and contributors do often comes from commercial entities who have adequate resources to provide proper development time to give back to the community. The current Create React app text only excludes OSS software that has no commercial activity around it. Okay, so the left pad incident would have no problem. Unfortunately, it defines commercial activity in this way, where the main contributors to free and open source projects are developers employed by commercial entities. When such developers or employers can exercise control as to which modifications are accepted in the code base, the project should generally be considered to be commercial nature. This is kind of an interesting statement, right? So how I read this statement is that there's two ways to read this, is that if an employee controls a repo that the commercial the commercial entity can assert control over, then that's considered commercial. But that's also not technically what it says in the text, right? The text also says where the main contributors to free open source are developers employed by commercial entities. So that's pretty much every open source project ever, right? We're all employed. Very few are people living for free off of the goodwill of issues filed in mean ways. When such developers notice the or the employer can exercise. So when such developers can exercise control as to which modifications are accepted in the code base, isn't that literally every open source project ever? Remember, ors can be dropped. Drop that statement, and that's literally every one of my projects, right? That's all of them. That's every single one except for the person not working full time. Or I'm not sure how they define working, right? It should have been an and. It should have been an and. What it should have been is you should have dropped the word developer and said the employer can exercise control. If the employer can exercise control, one could argue that it's a commercial product. Okay, I get that. But since, wow, okay, that's kind of crazy. This can be read to mean that if the main contributor are not employed or not unemployed, then the project is commercially tainted. Yeah, see, that's what I mean. Yeah, exactly. It does not clarify what was probably intended, that the employer fully controls the project here. See, yeah, I agree with that. Additionally, it says, accepting donations without the intention of making a profit should not count as commercial activity unless such donations are made by commercial entities and are reoccurring in nature. See, that's super interesting because here's something that's interesting. Front-End Masters makes a lot of open source contribution. I think they're at like $500,000 in open source contributions. They're a commercial entity. Do you see the problem? Right? Like, they're just a teaching site. But does that mean these things are now commercial? Like, I think they gave like Neovim like $100,000 or something like that. Some just nutso amount of money. The first part is acceptable. By reoccurring donations from commercial entities are the upside of contributing back to open source. I know, you really just make it so that contributing back is a downside. Really, it makes contributing back a downside for commercial products. Oh my goodness! This may force the projects to reject large contributions to avoid becoming tainted, and will likely cause commercial entities to enact further bans on OSS contributions and pull their support entirely. This is wild. Further, if Create React App is passed without proper exemptions, these developers and maintainers may face legal risks and liabilities for vulnerabilities found in code used in commercial products. The OSS developers have no visibility into how and in what instances their components are used. Only the final manufacturer of the product has the visibility. Now, here's a following up question. Is this ex post facto? You know what I mean? Like, if there's a company A that's used some product and it's on version 1, and then when this thing releases, I release version 2 that says you can use this free of everything except in the EU due to laws, right? Let's just say this actually starts happening. But they're using version 1. Version 1 has a security issue. Can they then hold me accountable? I don't know. It's just interesting, right? The potential legal risk without upside would discourage OSS developers from contributing to and maintaining open source projects. This situation not only undermines the spirit of open source, but could bring about an open source crisis and isolate the EU from the rest of the world. Non-EU open source producers will avoid the EU market, meaning no access to Linux, Apache, Kubernetes, and many other projects. This feels like FUD, right? Like that it's really that intense. But we also don't, like, until the first lawsuit drops from the government, we don't know what's going to happen. Like, real talk, we don't know what's going to happen. If a lawsuit, you know, just like everyone got all up in arms about the Rust Foundation dropping this trademark policy and saying that we're overreacting and all that, but in the same week, a very similar trade policy from Oracle made somebody take down a website called Rust for JavaScript developers. Oracle made them take it down because it contained the word JavaScript. Now imagine a world where Rust Foundation has the same powers to do so. Rust for JavaScript developers could get both taken down by Oracle for using JavaScript and Rust Foundation for using Rust, right? Like there is a real world where that happens, and it literally happened. And so you can see the dangers of these things, right? It actually does. There is real world implications for when something could get taken down. Now, maybe it will never get taken down. Maybe this is all completely overreacting. Maybe there's absolutely no problems at all. But you got to remember, the gun's still loaded. It's still potential. Yeah, if you don't know, JavaScript owns Oracle. You can always see this by just going to x.com/JavaScript. JavaScript conversations from an Oracle DevRel. How great is this? Like, people have no idea that this product is just straight up straight up owned by Oracle. Anyways, it's just something to think about, right? It's just something to think about, and we should all think about these kind of things. The potential legal risk without upside, oh yeah, we have already read this, may be prompted to ban EU consumption to avoid being considered a distributor. EU project concerned about liability could put their source code off the internet. What? And the EU business may be forced to halt contributions to open source projects. CRAY imperils vulnerability disclosure. Well, what? Interesting. Yeah. The regulation would also require that vulnerabilities be disclosed to the European Union Agency for Cybersecurity and CISIA within hours of discovery. Gosh, that sounds awful. Whether or not a fix is available. This would make it difficult to conduct coordinated disclosure, where researchers give vendors time to develop security patches before vulnerabilities are disclosed publicly. Oh my goodness! Oh my goodness! This is actually the worst possible thing that could ever happen, is that you have to disclose publicly vulnerabilities within hours. This is actually the worst possible thing, right? I think anyone, no matter how you feel about the law or everything we've read previously, this is actually a danger to society. This is actually the biggest danger to society, which is that you make it public. People abuse it, dog. Just disclose it within the EU so you can use it. Dude, oh my goodness. This would increase the chances that bad actors will develop exploits for further vulnerabilities before they are fixed, putting every company that uses software at risk. This would be an unfortunate outcome for a law whose purpose is to improve software. Yeah, I would agree with this. I don't know. So I guess the question is this. Are vulnerabilities publicly available? We don't know that. But if that is the case, that is hyper insane. Right. What can we do? As I mentioned earlier, this is a time time is of the essence, since the measure is moving quickly and faces a vote this week. We need the community to take immediate action. GitHub and other industry bodies need to publicly oppose the proposed measure. EU developers and maintainers and others need to ask their European Parliament members to investigate further and bring the voices of open source community to the discussion. Legislators need to understand the importance of collaboration and the role of global developer community in driving open source innovation. Open source projects underpin much of the software we use every day. Absolutely. Okay, shut up! Sure, I stream from Windows. Don't judge me. You don't know me, okay? You don't know me, and you don't get to just sit in here and say that shit to me, okay? You'll shut up. You'll shut up, chat. Legislation that deters contributors would interfere with the open source community's ability to maintain existing projects and deliver new software. Shut up! I can see it moving right now. Shut up. I can see it. I can see it right there. Impacting the tech industry, hurting the EU economy, and comprising overall software security. All right, so let's render some judgment really quickly. Again, we're taking this article at face value. So I'm positive 100%, since this is even as like agnostically to a political party as this is, I am positive, since this is a political item, there are going to be people that are going to be very, very upset. Please don't become a jerk, okay? Don't do that. If this article is true on its face value, I would highly urge anybody and everybody to do exactly this, right? Because it is really important. If this is truly a face value article, that you wouldn't want this to be. You would not want this. If the outcomes are possible, even if they're not enforced, but just simply possible, you don't want that gun laying around. Because the day it goes from possible to happening is a very bad day. I know it's too late for one part, but it's not too late for the second part. So it's too late for the first part, which is July 19th, right here. It still has to go and be sent to the full parliament. Highly recommend you actually do something useful with your life, especially if you live in the EU. This is your time to make a fuss about it. Because honestly, if this is truly true and what we're seeing is really real, then please take a moment, do the right thing, make a fuss about it. Because that does sound like it's pretty shitty. This would actually be pretty shitty in general for the internet. I ultimately don't want blockchain. And if we somehow get the blockchain because of crappy ideas like this, I'm going to be sad, okay? I don't want blockchain, okay? I don't want everything we do to be in some slow-ass ledger that just destroys the world of GPUs, okay? That's what I don't want that. So please, 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 make something happen. Where's the Zelda? Where the hell is Zelda? That is actually a really good joke. Where's Zelda? I really like that one. Hey, the name is I'm not trying to be political. I just simply want open source community to be healthy and thriving, and I don't want people to get liability for something they have no really liability for, okay? You produce software and you just want to share it with people and people use it and it ends up being bad. Well, guess what? That's how all software is. It's just simply the difference between open source, where I'm doing it for charity, and versus commercial, where I have to do it every single day, where we have a whole team looking at security issues, okay? So you can't do that. You can't just do these kind of things because that would be crazy. Again.